Good Sunday morning to each and every one of you, my father's children. You are tuned in to Sunday Morning Praise with your favorite church girl, the one, the only Kayla J. And it is time for yet another installment of our series, Marriage, the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And today I am really excited to welcome to the Sunday morning stage Pastor Jeffrey Gaskin and his wife, First Lady Vanessa Gaskins. Good morning, you guys. Welcome to Sunday Morning Praise.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good
Thank
morning.
you.
Glad to
Awesome.
be
I
here.
am so excited to have you both here today to share your story. But before we do all that, I want to just check in with you guys. Summer has sprung. We
Oh, yeah.
think it's still a little cold,
Mhm.
but how y'all feeling?
I'm feeling wonderful. The school year ended for me last Wednesday. So I'm good. It could snow, it could be cold. I'm on my break and I'm loving it.
Yeah. I'm glad that she's free and that she has some space and time now. And then I'm mindful that half of the year is already gone.
Oh,
And
yeah.
we are looking forward to wrapping up the end of this year. So, yeah,
Yeah.
time is ticking. But yes, doing well and just excited and happy.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited that summer is here and y'all get to spend more time together. Uh,
Yes.
and speaking of spending time together, let's go on and get started, you guys.
All
So
right.
I want to hear from both of you.
All
Share
right.
your love story. How did you meet? How all that goody goodness.
Okay. You want the truth or her version?
My version is the truth.
Oh, okay. All right.
um, we met. Our story is like very unique. We met in church. It was actually a first Saturday meeting in January of 1996. And I was the state youth secretary, and he was a youth leader at his church.
Mhm.
And I remember that particular meeting. I was getting numbers and I was trying to match names with faces. So I remember him there, like, this is that person, that's Jeff Gaskin, and this is that person. So fast forward the next
Tell them
week.
about when you asked for my phone number.
Okay, dear. I got everybody's number. I got
Okay.
everybody's number that was at the meeting.
Okay.
So
Very
anyway,
sly, very sly. I like that.
the very next week, I'm a school teacher and I was teaching in West Philadelphia. Very next week, I was in class and it just hit me that one of my students' last name was Gaskin. And I said, I don't hear that name too often. And so I asked my student, do you have a family member named Jeff? And she said, yes. She said, yeah, my uncle. And I said, oh, okay, what does he look like? And she started to describe him. And her description just didn't match what I remember seeing. And so I asked her, does he go to church? And she said, yes. And I said, well, what church does he go to? And when she told me the church, I said, I know him. I just met him, at a church meeting. I'm trying to explain to her what First Saturday meeting is. She said, oh, okay. She went home every day and
Mhm.
said, I think my teacher thinks she knows you. And then she came to school every day and said, my uncle said that he might know you. And when I say every day, she was my seventh grade student. And so one day she
The
came in,
wheels.
say it again.
She was greasing the wheels.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
yes, yes.
She came in one day and she said, my uncle wanted to know if you were cute. And I said, oh, Lord, this is getting out of hand. And
Mhm.
I said, okay. I said, just have a seat. Let's get started. Couple of weeks after that, the counselor showed up at my classroom door and she told me, listen, one of the students' uncles came to bring her lunch. And I said, oh, okay. And I looked in the hallway and it was him. And so I just told myself, all right, that's him. And she went out to the hallway. She got the lunch that he brought, came back in, and he left with the counselor. I think it was maybe 2 minutes later, he had ditched the counselor, came all the way back up to my classroom and walked in. And he just said, hello, my name is Jeff Gaskin. I'm from the Garden of Prayer Church. And if there's anything our youth department can do. And I'm like, oh, okay, okay. And in my mind, I'm like, this is him. Now, the funny thing is, that student, his niece, is a twin. She has a twin, in the same school. He didn't bring lunch for her. He brought lunch for the one that was in my classroom. And so, so
She needed her lunch.
okay. So anyway, after that, I think we went out one time and I made a decision at that one time, like, okay, no, I don't like him. No, this is not going to work. And so that was like January, February of 19.
After the first time, one time.
After
Yeah.
she done asked for my phone number.
No, you know, I so I'm 6 months older and I felt no, he's too young. I don't know. No, thank you. And I know a lot of people say 6 months, that's not a lot. But for me at that time, I said no. And then I thought he was just too skinny. I'm like, he's just too thin. So anyway, the entire year 1996, he would call me. I wouldn't answer the phone, or I would talk really short and get off the phone. I was always pleasant when I saw him, but I just wasn't interested. And then by December of that year, he told me, listen, I just want to be your friend. I said, is that all you want? Because if that's all you want, okay, but nothing else. And he said, yeah, that's all I want. That's all I want. And so I let my guard down and I decided to, all right, I'm going to answer the phone. I'm going to actually have a conversation with him. And I realized very quickly, wow, this is really a nice guy. And I decided, all right, I got to now tell him that I do like him. After telling him all this time, I'm not interested. And so the rest is history. That it was December 21st, 1996, when he said, you know, I just want to get to know you better. I just want to be your friend. December 21st, 1997, we actually got engaged. And then we were engaged a year and a half.
A year and a half, yep.
And got married in June of 1999. In fact, next week is our 26th wedding anniversary.
Indeed.
Did she tell the truth?
She told mostly the truth.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Did you talk about my phone number?
Your phone? Okay.
So, but yeah, mostly the truth. Mostly the truth. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
Well,
So,
happy early wedding anniversary to both of you guys. Hopefully, you know, on your wedding anniversary night, y'all can sit back and laugh at this and watch it. Have some good memories. But that's awesome. And all I gotta say, Lady Gaskin, is them Kojic boys be sly.
Oh, yes.
Them Kojic boys be sly.
Oh, yes.
I just wanted to be your friend.
Yeah, that'd be the line right there.
The lies, the deception.
They come out the same playbook. So when did you guys know that you wanted to spend the rest of your life together? I'm going to address that to Pastor Gaskin. When did you know? Listen, this is the one. I want her to hold my last name.
You know, it's interesting because at that time I was seeking a wife. I wanted to get married, and so I had a group of friends and cousins that I would hang around, and we would always ask couples, how did you know that she was the one? We would ask married men with that, and without fail, they always say to me, "Oh, you'll know." And I would hate that response. And so as we dated and as I fell in love, or I won't say fell, but as I was in love with her, and I recognized it, and I said, you know, I remember praying and asking God about it, and because I didn't want to make a big mistake, right? So I remember praying and asking God about it, and I remember the Lord speaking to me like, listen, if you're seeking me and you're putting me first, I'm not going to let you go out here and just make a blunder. And I was like, okay, Lord. And so I continued to pray about it. And when I told my friends that I was now engaged, they said, you're going to ask her to marry you? I said, yeah. They said, now tell us, how do you know? And I turned to them and I just said, you'll know. And I wasn't able to put it in any kind of test, but I knew that I was in love with her. And I think for men, it works a little differently, that when we are interested in a woman, we will make our intentions known. She will know. It doesn't take us months and years to kind of debate and figure out, like, do I want to be with this woman? But there is something that God has put in man, and when he finds his wife, he knows he has found his wife, and he's going to go after it. And I knew, and I knew, and I think I knew. I'm trying to think of when I knew. We got engaged a year later.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I remember telling her that I love her on, it was Valentine's Day.
Mm-hmm.
So that was maybe 2 months after we had been dating.
Yeah.
But I think I knew by the summer. I knew it by June. I knew, and I started shopping for rings at that point.
How did you know, Lady Gaskin?
It was very interesting. I mentioned that he was the youth leader at his church. And I recognized and realized that as crazy as he was about me, he felt that way about God. And that was attractive. I remember we were on a date once, and he was rushing through this date because he wanted to get to his church for, I think it was a prayer service that the youth department was having. And
Mm-hmm.
I was really impressed with that he wasn't putting God on the back burner. And I remember another time we were on a date, and he's looking around in the restaurant, and he's asking me, "Do you know how many people here are probably not saved?" And I think, well, don't get up and start preaching. This is a date. But just recognizing that he really loved God, and he was really saved. It wasn't just a show. It wasn't just, all right, this person, they said they're saved, but he was saved at church, saved at home, saved on the street, saved everywhere. And so that really let me know, all right, this may be the one.
Yeah. I encourage people, especially single women, so don't get hooked up with I call it a half saved man. A man that goes to church on Sunday, but that's the only time he's thinking about God. I'm like, find somebody that really loves the Lord, and then they will treat you right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good nugget. I hope y'all listening. That's a good nugget. That's a good nugget.
Indeed.
So I want to dig a little deep and get a little personal. You both come from, pretty robust families, and y'all seem you were very family oriented beforehand. The fact that the niece was greasing the wheels,
Yeah,
Uh,
for sure.
so how did the blending of families come? How do you all stay family oriented from, especially being that you all were very heavily involved in your own families?
Mm.
Interestingly, when we got married, I was at my father's church. He was at his uncle's church, and we decided that we were going to both leave those churches and find a place that will be, ours, that we will go out and join a church, a different ministry together. And it took us about a year to do that, but we found a church. We went to a church in Norristown, and we were there for about 2 years. From there, we went to a United Methodist church for 2 years. And after that, that's when we started Living Waters, our own church. So, family is very important to us. One of the interesting things that we realized as our family grew, as we had the boys, is that everything that we needed for the church and the ministry was right there in our house. We had no idea that our children were going to be musicians and that they were going to be, active in the ministry. And so when the pandemic hit and everybody had to go home, we were still going into the church. The boys would play. I would sing. We would both preach. And, we started like the online streaming so people could actually participate. And so I could see that, the hand of God was on that right from the beginning. So family is big. Our two older boys are 23 and 21. And so he has had started a tradition. He took them out for their 21st birthday to
Del Frisco's.
Del Frisco's, no McDonald's. We're going to Del Frisco's. Just bonding.
I'm turning 21 soon.
Bonding with the two older boys are artsy, and the younger one, he's an athlete, and so he's We make sure that we're present. There's so many times that he's been on a football field holding the chains. So much so
Mhm.
they gave him a coach shirt after a while.
Mhm.
He's been on a stage for a talent show, helping the boys do whatever they needed to do
Mhm.
for a talent show. We have our family thread, text thread, where we kind of communicate with the boys and let them know what's going on. Because at this stage, everybody has their lives. Two of them are driving, uh,
Mhm.
different schedules, but we make sure that we kind of touch bases, look in their eyes, talk to them, um,
Yeah.
and show that family's important. We kind of built up in them as well that they were all in the same camp at one time, and I said if one of you loses your spending money, the other two really needs to jump in. You are your brother's keeper. Make
Mhm.
sure that that one person doesn't skip a beat. So.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think early on, our families really made it easy for us to be family. And
Mhm.
Mom Chambers, she would come by often and just be present so that we can spend time together and have our own date and watch the kids. And so it
Mhm.
was just that close bond. Just beyond our own family unit, but just the extended family, and it made it very easy,
Yeah.
to just gel and to connect, and so that was a blessing for us. And then for me, being a father of boys, you just find yourself in spaces and places where you have to be involved, and oftentimes you don't recognize that they appreciate it until after the fact. You're just kind of living life, doing as life is lifing, but when you
Mhm.
sit back and reflect, you realize that they actually appreciate and need you there. Yeah.
Let's pause there because you brought them up. You all have all boys.
Oh
All
boy.
boys. All
how
boys.
how was that dynamic in the family? Not one girl, just
Mhm.
all guys. I always
Mm.
hear that could be hard on one parent. How did you all keep that? Because I also hear that sometimes it's hard to keep boys like kind of centered, but you all still sound like you're very family centered, Christ centered. So how
Mhm.
how did that work, the parenting to three amazing men?
I think church played an essential role, right? So it wasn't a thing of I'm sending you to church. It was we go to church. And the example that they had before them was church is important. We love God, and we are not just hearers of the word, but we're doers. And they saw us being authentically Christian in church and at home. And so I think that gave a lot of credibility. Not that we were trying to build it, but I believe it resonated in their minds that wait, this is actually important. This God thing is real. And I can remember my middle son, we were at a church service, and the Spirit of God fell heavily in there. And he said to me on the ride home, he said, Man, I said, what is it? He said, God really must be something. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I just saw how the Spirit of God was in that place. He said, God really, it must be something for people to respond like that. And like I think for us, it just plays such. I think being a pastor and just being so centered in the church played a much bigger role in their upbringing than we probably realized intentionally, but it certainly did.
Yeah, for me, I come from a boy heavy family. I have no sisters. I have an older brother, younger brother. So we have the three boys. My younger brother, he has three boys. My older brother has four boys, and then he's the one with girls. So he has two girls, and so it's just a boy heavy family. And I didn't know that they were boys while I was carrying them. I was one of those moms. I wanted to be surprised. So by the second boy, when I was just kind of shocked, like, that's not a girl. What's going on here? I had to prepare myself mentally for the third birth. And I said, if this is a boy, then I know that this is my lot in life, that God is just making me a boy mom, that this is a
Mhm.
boy family. And I remember when he was born, and the doctor said, what you got at home? I said, two boys. She said, well, you got another one. I said, okay.
Mhm.
This is my lot in life. Um, and I think, Pastor Jeff's his temperament is of at such a caliber that he's like the perfect boy dad, living by example, guiding them and um, walking them down the right path so that they can be men of God, that they can be men that are upstanding and living above reproach.
Mhm. Yeah. You know, I actually knew what we were having for the first two boys. So we
And
go to
you
the
didn't share?
we go to the ultrasound and they go through the whole thing. And then afterwards, she gets up, she has to go to the restroom. And when she walks away, I said, "Okay, doc, what are we having?" So the doctor told me the first time, and I was like, "Okay, boy." And then second time, found out it's a boy. So I said the third time, I said, "I'm not going to find out, and then that way we'll have a girl." But ended up with another boy. So yeah, but I knew for the first two, and I did not share. I kept those as secret.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
I didn't want to know.
yeah, I did, and she didn't know that I knew until after they were born.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, I held
Mm-mm-mm.
it.
Secrets, secrets, secrets.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
um, well, awesome. Thank you guys for sharing that. Wanna take a twist and talk about ministry. Uh,
Mhm.
you both are heavily involved in ministry. You are a pastor and first lady, but you all do different outreach things. I know, Lady Gaskin, we had you on before to talk about your prayer book. So just share a little bit about how ministry affects your marriage.
Hmm. How ministry affects our marriage. Hmm.
I think that ministry really enhances our marriage. And when you think about marriage and how the church is the bride of Christ, I think our marriage sets the tone and it is the example of, the relationship that the church has with Christ. Um, we are both heavily in ministry, and one of the things that I've noticed is that as tight and as close as we are, that would impact the church at large and those that are watching. Somebody's always watching, so that would impact, and they see how we treat each other. They see that we love each other and that we're not at odds, and so that causes them to treat us in kind. Um, I realize that the Bible speaks about it's not good for man to be left alone. That I am created to be their helpmeet, and so when it comes to ministry, many times he's preaching, I'm praying for him in the pews. I'm remembering for him to have his preaching towel because he's not going to remember it.
Mhm.
They
Um,
never do.
um, Whenever there's an issue, especially like if there's female members, he may ask me, "Hey, I need you to call, or I need you to pray for such and such a person,
Mhm.
to make sure that that is covered." Um, yeah, I think that's
Yeah,
for me.
and it's interesting in that as I grew up, my uncle was my pastor, and her father was her pastor,
Mhm.
and so church has always been important to us, and it's an important part of our marriage. But we don't allow it to dominate our marriage in that we still find time to steal away or to be a couple, which is important. But I think it has impacted our marriage, our family, our life in a positive way, because you really don't see one without the other. And people really see us as one in the ministry. And it's not something I shy away from, but I embrace it because I think it it gives identity to who we are as at Living Waters.
Mhm.
Yeah.
How do you balance it? You talked about you make time. So is it just the making time, or are there specific things to make sure? Listen, it's time for home. It's time for wife. Now it's time for ministry. How do you all keep that balance?
Yeah, well, I will tell you, it certainly is a juggling act, especially when the boys were smaller, right?
Mhm.
Because you got to tend to them, you got to tend to each other. And once again, Mom Chambers was great at that because we could always find relief and be intentional. It is also in the making of time. I can't remember; it was not too long ago, but Lady V said, like, "Hey, we've got to have a date." and we went out to the place in
Mhm.
Skippack Pike, somewhere near there.
Yeah.
But it's just in the making of time, to say like we're going to just put things on pause and just spend time together. And I think it's just being very intentional about it. And when you love someone, you love something, it's not that hard to find
Mhm.
time for something that you love to do.
Yeah, that's true. And I have the belief that every pastor needs a pastor, every counselor needs a counselor, every first lady needs a first lady. So we also make sure that we, in terms of ministry, we um, widen our circle. So there's another church that I may go to where I could just sit back and be poured into. Another ministry that he goes to.
Mhm.
There's a pastor there that's pouring into other pastors to make sure that we are in the right place and we're not constantly just depleting ourselves at the
Mhm.
church. And not building up ourselves as a couple and as ministry leaders.
That was a nugget. I hope y'all heard that too,
Mhm.
especially for our pastors and first lady couples that are listening. Find a
Mhm.
ministry that you can get poured into, because that is very important. You all are giving and giving and giving, and then you have to get something too. You can't
Oh yeah.
give without getting anything. So that was good. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, our time is coming quickly to an end. Those minutes go by so fast.
Oh yes.
Mhm.
But I want to ask you guys, what advice would you give to new couples, engaged couples, newlyweds, on two aspects? One, who has the large families, how can you continue to stay family oriented and you know make your own family at the same time, and then to new couples who are entering ministry together as well.
Mhm.
I would say, in terms of making time, being intentional. Like it's not just going to happen. That you have to be intentional. Like, all right, Friday night. All right, our calendar is going to be clear. It's just going to be me and you. We're going such and such a place. I know that there were times that I text him from work and say, all right, today has been a day. We've got to do something tonight. And he said, all right, where we going? Let's go somewhere. Let's kind of decompress. And so making that time, putting other things on the back burner, and just being intentional. It's not just going to happen by itself. And then I think with ministry, a good piece of advice that I would give is something that a lot of first ladies experiences where people love the pastor and they may not like the first lady.
Mhm.
Um, that happens more often than not. And it could be covert, it could be undercurrent. And I think that a good piece of advice would be for the pastor or the husband, set the tone for how people are to treat your spouse, how they are to respect your marriage. I remember there was a woman in our church and her number got changed. She got a new phone number. And so she went to him and said, "Well, Pastor, I got a new number." He said, "Oh, okay. Give that number to my wife." And so when she was giving it to me, her face looked like she had been sucking on lemons. I was so tickled and I laughed. And I said, "Don't worry, sweetie. I'm going to give him the number." But having that wisdom of knowing, all right, I'm not going to cross the line. I'm not going to make any room for the enemy. But I think that it's very important that that tone is set from the beginning.
Yeah, I would say the number one piece of advice I would give to a man that was getting married or would be to find somebody that you really love and somebody that really loves God. Don't find somebody that you kind of like or somebody that kind of likes you, because if you find somebody that you really love, there's
Mhm.
nothing that you wouldn't do for that person. If that person does something, you're not, your first reaction isn't going to be, well, let me just pack my bags and go. It's going to be, how do I make things right? How do I make things better? Because you
Mhm.
love them, and then love will overlook things. And so that my first piece of advice would be fall in love, find somebody you really, really love, and then the
Mhm.
rest of it, becomes easier to manage through. And I would say for younger couples entering into ministry to think about what is your desire for that ministry? What does a healthy marriage look like in ministry? And kind of keep track of that, right? Write it down. Don't lose focus on that. So that if you find yourself straying from that, you can always go back to it and say, like, this isn't what I envisioned. I didn't envision that the ministry would be growing, but we wouldn't be talking to each other, but to understand what does a healthy marriage look like in the face of a healthy ministry and work towards that.
I like that. What does a healthy marriage look like in the face of a healthy ministry?
Yeah.
They're really dropping gems. I hope y'all are writing them down. All
Yeah.
right.
Well, one thing that Lady V said, and this is just happened naturally, but I do love her, and I hold her in high regard and high respect, and a large part of that is that has been in my ear. Like I've heard that from wise counsel from others, and as a result of that, you can see that mirrored in the church. We don't have that problem, and I'm proud to say that we don't have that problem at Living Waters of a first lady being treated like a second class citizen. So I'm thankful for that.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. All right. So you mentioned the church. Before you go, I want to give you both a chance to share about your ministry, where it is, and the things that you all have going on. And Lady V, a chance for you to just share, the other things that you have going on, how to purchase your book and things of that nature.
Okay.
So we're Living Waters Christian Center. We're located at 60th and Spruce. Our address is 5949 Spruce Street. We have a men's ministry. We have a women's ministry. We have a youth ministry. We are active in the church, active in the community. We, in fact, by the time this air, we will have done our food giveaway on the 21st. And so we really try to be present, and we try to be a place where everybody can come and grow. And the culture at Living Waters is one of respect and care for God's people, that everybody is growing in grace and no one should be thrown away.
Yes, and prayer is a strong foundation at our church. It is built on prayer, and that is connected definitely with my book, which is Morning Fire, and it is a prayer devotional. I am actually working on volume 2, and I've been working forever and ever, but I'm going to be obedient and get that out this summer. And that book can be found on Amazon. You can also look on my website, ladyvdevotional.com, and purchase the book. And I'm pretty local. I like delivering. I like signing the books. And so if you would like to see that or get a signed copy, you can certainly reach out to us, come to the church. That won't be an issue. But prayer is a big thing, a big thing. We have a prayer conference every year. We do our morning fire prayer Monday through Friday and on Thursday nights. So that's a plus with our church.
Awesome. A very active church, a very active church. So again, give us the address one more time and your service time.
5949 Spruce Street, Philadelphia, 19139. And our service time, morning worship begins at 11 a.m. Our Sunday school begins at 10:15 a.m. We love to see you there.
All right. That means y'all have about an hour and a half to get yourself ready and over to Living Waters today. Okay, y'all?
Right. Awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Awesome. Pastor Jeff, Lady Vanessa, thank you so much for joining me this morning on Sunday Morning Praise.
All right.
Thank you for having us. We enjoyed it.
Take care.
Awesome. All right, folks, that does it for this installation of Sunday Morning Praise, Marriage, the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. It's time to go to a quick commercial break. On the other side, we're going to have our prayer and more gospel music. So stay tuned right here to WURD Progressive